Hello, everybody. Nice to see you here. And there's always that moment of getting used to the lights. You know, the thing about being a storyteller is mostly you can see your audience. But I can feel you there, so that's fantastic. One of the strangest questions, or the most provocative questions anybody can ask me at this point in time in my life is, where are you from? Because that makes me wonder what I should say to them. Do I say where I was born? Do I say where I came from last? And when they say to me, where is your place, what do I say? Actually, I brought you a picture of my place. This is my place. My traveling friend, also known as the Wheels of Fortune. So this suitcase is actually the home for me from mid-March this year until the week before Christmas when I go back to New Zealand. I've spent most of my life as a traveler, and I learn a lot by journeying. And it was only recently that I realized intentional nomad was what I actually do with my life. In 2004, my landlord decided to sell the house I was living in for the last 7 years, and he came to me to apologize, and I went, yes! Finally, something is happening. I decided to follow the internal urge in my system and put most of my things into storage. So what I do have on this planet is a storage unit. I used to say I have a storage unit and a car, but last week I had an email saying my car had been totaled while I was away. So now I have a storage unit and I have a suitcase in Frankfurt. And this is how I travel. And intentional nomading for me means connecting people and places, witnessing people and places, doing the work I'm called to do. And it gave me a challenge, and I want to give you a challenge too. Here's your challenge. What question is your life asking for right now? And what story are you living in and living into? So in 2004, I asked myself a question. Am I prepared to follow the longing of my soul and be of service in this world? And the second question was, am I willing to trust that life will look after me and show me where I'm supposed to go? As somebody once said to me, if you had been meant to have an ordinary life, you would have had it by now. So what question is your life calling for? And what story are you living in and living into? Our stories are the way we make sense and meaning of the world. So if you were human, you are a storyteller. And it's an interesting thing to realize the story you're living in. I have the big privilege of being able to move from system to system. Actually, I was saying to somebody the other night, perhaps I am the Romani of 2013. I am the gypsy that you cannot see coming over your border and looking at your system and saying, here's what I see. And I brought you some stories of the road so you can see what I've been seeing in my journeys. The first one is this. The question of what is your life preparing you for? In March this year, I was in Järna, that's south of Stockholm. It's a little village that is based on Rudolf Steiner principles. We were going to have an art of hosting training. I almost didn't go to this one. It was being run by some young people in our system, and they said to me, we think we have it under control. You don't need to come. That made my ears perk up, as you can imagine. I said, I think I'll go. So the first night, or the first day, we're with the hosting team. We're planning what we do. We normally plan our trainings the day before they happen because we are in emergence and we deal with what's ever in the pot. And that night, everything was looking fine. But at 2 o'clock in the morning, the barn with the organic cows, much beloved by the community, started on fire. It burned until 5 a.m. 70 of the cows were killed by the morning. The fire burned the entire day of our first day of training. Half of the people in our training were devastated because death had come into the room. The other half were from Stockholm. They didn't know anything about what had happened. The hosting team was in disarray. And something inside of me said, this is the moment I have been doing my practice for. I said, death has come into the room. Can we lean in and host it? Because life is asking us to host it as it comes in this moment. People leaned in. The next day, one of our hosting team members, the one who was supposed to be holding the day, said, my brother has gone missing, presumed suicidal. I cannot host myself, or I need to host myself. I need to step out of leadership, so I stepped in. And then the next day, young person connected to the group, age 26, pregnant, goes to the hospital with pain, has a hemorrhage, and dies. So you can imagine that I'm standing in the midst of my process and I'm being questioned about, do I carry the eldership? Do I carry my practice enough to be in this kind of emergence in the moment when it's needed? So this was a story about eldership. And I'm asking you what your eldership is, because I think eldership has nothing to do with age. It has everything to do with what you are carrying on behalf of the whole. So what is your eldership right now? Because the planet is calling for eldership to come in a new way. What is it that you are carrying on behalf of the whole? That's the first story. The second one happened in April when I went to Brisbane, and I was working with Uniting Care Communities, an organization that supports disabled people in the community. We were having 4 open space sessions in 4 parts of the room. I had a person in my session who was severely disabled. He looked like this. And he had a caregiver with him who had a board, a plexiglass board that looked very much like a keyboard. She would take his finger and he would point to things. He could not speak, but he was extremely articulate. This is what he posted in our open space session. Are you prepared to really listen to me and learn about me in order that I may live, not merely exist, rather than just exist? That is a cry from the heart. Sorry about that. Forgot the microphone was there. It's a cry from humanity's heart, from one of us who doesn't look like everybody else, doesn't look normal, but is intrinsically human, is part of Poets Without Words, is an amazing contribution, but looks quite different than you and me in this audience right now. So are we prepared to listen to this call for humanity? That was in April. In June, I was in Bratislava with 2 parts of Habitat for Humanity, which had been forcibly merged by their head office. Ever have one of those? Didn't know how to make it together, but one person in our opening round, what do you hope for from our time together, said, I hope for us to come home together. So these 2 things went directly to my heart because I think they're exactly what all of us as humanity are asking for. Are you prepared to listen to me and understand me so I can live and not merely exist? And can we ever please come home together? And I think people are looking for that in work too. We spend so much time in work. Can we be at home? Where is homefulness inside of the working world? It's really an interesting question. And I'm seeing this thread right around, the cry from humanity. Please see me. Please help me to come home with you so we can do good stuff together. That's what I really want to do. So that's my second set of stories. It's about seeing the humanity that is out there being called for to be recognized. Third story, May of this year, I'm in Brussels and I'm with 60 other consultants who are serving the European institutions. We're a likely looking group of people. And so in the beginning, the people who are hosting us say, would you please, here's Brussels, it's right in the center, and would you please position yourself around in the country you feel it most at home at? So people are positioning themselves around. You can imagine I'm moving from country to country going, hey. And so people are speaking from, here's why I love Eastern Europe, here's what I love about Spain, here's what I love about this. Finally, there's one person in the middle. She kind of does this. Puts up her hand. She says, I can't stand here any longer because I'm feeling this pain and I feel like I'm about to cry, but I have to tell you something. At this moment, everyone around her steps away. But she says, I'm so feeling that the center is tired. I feel so tired I can barely stand. And she's standing in Brussels. The center is tired. I have been hearing this since 2009. Our organizational structures, our centers, our ways of working and organizing are shaking. Have you noticed? We're trying to do what we've done always harder, but it doesn't work. We're actually in that metamorphic time of fundamental change. Something new is being called for. So this story of the European institutions and the amount of layers of trauma that are in them, in the persons, in the institution working on the persons, in the countries they represent, all of us, at that moment of how do we do the work we're called to do. And I know people inside of the European institutions, there are many of them who truly want to be of service to all the people of Europe. And they're finding it hard because of the structures that they're in. So how hard are you making it for people who work with you? I think your point is exactly right, Rick. How do we have more fun and do really good work together? And how do we get the stupid stuff out of the way? But I want to pair this story in May with something I just experienced in Vancouver Island 2 weeks ago. I was on the west coast of Vancouver Island on a beach called Tinwis, which in the Nuu-Chalmouth language means calm waters. However, this particular resort actually has storm watching. You can, in the wintertime, come and do storm watching. Interesting activity Canadians do. But I was actually there for a learning village. I was there for the Hahopa learning village. Hahopa in the Nuchalnath tongue means to learn with beauty and kindness. We were there meeting on the beach to reclaim this place because that particular beach had been the clash of two worldviews. The local indigenous worldview of how to live in nature and the colonial worldview of trying to get the native out of the native, because it had been the site of a residential school, this awful thing that has happened through North America, through Canada, through Australia, to some extent in New Zealand, where children were taken away from their parents to try to make them modern people. It was a perfect storm of great magnitude. The Nuchalnath people, though, have a way of saying something that's kept them together for 10,000 years. The one who cannot ask for help cannot be trusted. It is kind to ask for help. So these two things about the center is tired and it's time and kind to ask for help are another theme that I'm carrying, the old and the new arising at the same time. And the final story is one from Denmark. For the last year and a half, we have been working on the story of Denmark going bankrupt. So as a story activist, this is part of my work. How do I recognize stories that can cause positive systemic shift? And this particular story of Denmark choosing a crisis to move into universal education is wonderful, because in that particular story, which is the seed of what Denmark is today, came this little kind of wonderful little thing. How do you make change? It is through unleashing the Trojan mice. You know what a Trojan horse is? Yeah. But Trojan mice is a loosely connected network of people who all want to make change together and who kind of sneak up on you because you don't notice them. They're small enough. That's exactly what happened in Denmark, where education became the key to turn it to what it is today. So the power of Trojan mice is the last thing, the power of change I'm carrying. So here's my message to you. If you are human, you're a storyteller, and it's time to get good at it. It's time to claim back the power of your story, not for more profit, not for more grandiose things, but to have a way to tell the world of how to use you well. If you want to be used well in the world, if you want to work at the intersection of your love and your mastery, you need to be able to tell the story so people can find you and know what to do. So here's a challenge for you. First, a statement. Each of us begins the journey towards personal discovery because someone else gave us a vision that allows us to be more creative, more resourceful, more powerful than the child inside of us could ever imagine. We do that through stories, through the power of our stories. So here's something I'd like you to consider. What is mine to do? This is the question. When the world didn't end on the 21st of December, did you notice? There was a powerful energy that came in, I think, that is demanding of us to know what is mine to do. So that's your question. Would you please write this question down somewhere and hold on to it? I've shared my stories right now, but I'm coming back at the end of the day to ask you for yours. What is mine to do, and what story is your life telling? Thank you. I don't know about you, but I've spent the whole day listening to stories of one form or another, sometimes punctuated by the staccato symphony of beer tabs opening. I was amazed at that. There was always another wave of beer tabs opening. It was kind of like, very cool, James. And I've never seen a number of people say hello to their beer quite like that. So the job right now is to ask yourself the question, what you've heard, and what that meant to you, and what it means to your own story. So I have with me here on my wrist the first piece of rope I've ever made. This piece of rope comes from the bark of the cedar tree in Vancouver Island. And I learned how to weave rope from a woman who is really the mistress of cedar, somebody who has mastery on this element. And it requires actually another person to hold one end of it, and then you kind of twist, twist, twist. So it's an interesting thing that when you weave cedar, you have to keep it moist enough so it's pliable. There has to be some fluid, some flow in order to make it. And then it ends up making something really, really strong. And to make it continue to be long, if you came close enough, you could see the little bits where I added in something further on down the line. I wove in something. And I remember listening to Elizabeth Gilbert talk about her book, Commitment. This is the book where she talks about how she decided to get married for the second time, even though she didn't want to. Legally, she had to in order for her partner to come back to the U.S. And she said one night she was lying in bed and she would, when she was wakeful, turn to her partner and say a word like fish or something. Knowing he was also awake, he would also tell her a story. And she said, and I took that story and I wove it into the hem of my nightgown. Isn't that the way to make relationship? So perhaps you've heard some story today that's weaving into your own story. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you to do something which is turn to a neighbor and talk to them. But before we do that, we're going to do a little bit of the bell test, just so at the end you know when to be quiet again. Because the challenge with telling somebody a story is knowing when to stop. Or even if you're listening to a story, not wanting to stop. So I don't know if you know this, but in the old black and white movies, all of the crowd scenes didn't have any scripted dialogue. The people just turned to each other and said, rhubarb, 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 because it makes your mouth move in a really funny way. So I'm going to ask you in a moment to turn to the person next to you and rhubarb them until you hear the bell, at which time this magical hush is going to fall across the whole audience. So would you just rhubarb the person next to you? Oh, I've been in some very good groups, so this is an excellently tuned group. Thank you very much. So in a moment, I'm just looking for the little push button thingy. Oh, there it is already. So I asked you at the beginning of all of this to answer the question, what is mine to do? What is mine to do? Because that, for me, feels like, as I've been traveling around the world, the prevailing energy that's out there, a demanding energy that says, what is mine to do? So please, would you turn to a partner and answer these two things? When you ask yourself the question, what is mine to do? What clarity do you now have? Has any more clarity come to you today through the focus of the stories you've heard from other people? And secondly, what story do you choose to tell with your life? And we're going to give you a massive, massive 7 minutes to talk to each other. That's about 3.25 minutes each. But I know you can do it because you're so focused. So would you please turn to somebody else, and with them, when you ask yourself the question, what is mine to do, what clarity do you have, and what story do you choose to tell with your life? Just the opening saga here for 3.25 minutes each way. When you hear the bell, we'll return to the front. Ooh, who could keep talking about that for a very long time? Anybody? Yeah. Am I back? Yes? Okay. So lovely to see you after all of today. Very nice. So maybe something has shifted for you. Maybe it hasn't. Maybe you've gone deeper in your own story, or you see a new one coming, or you sense the edge of something. You know, in the old days where we had the maps of the planet, and I've been to look at the Waldseemüller map of 1539. That's one of the ones that's in the U.S. Library of Congress because it's called the founding document. The first time America was named on a map was the Waldseemüller map. It's interesting to go in and ask for your badge and say, I'm studying the Waldseemüller map. And they go, what's that? And I said, it's in there. I'm going to find it. So on those kind of maps, there were always those kind of cloud figures and the legend, here be dragons. You know, you could fall off the edge of the map. It's an interesting thing to know where the center is and where the edge is. We've often thought the power is in the center. But we've all known that explorers who go to the edge find the new stuff. And we've been interested in them and we've been frightened of them because we all know what could happen if you go right to the edge. Number one, you may never come back. Number two, you might be changed forever. What does that mean? But I think of now the torus, the figure of the torus, T-O-R-U-S, this kind of energetic pattern, which is the pattern around the planet, here and the bottom of the planet apparently is also the energetic pattern around a human. And if we look at that kind of torus figure and the movement that's constant like this, it means that the center and the edge are equally important. We go to the edge to find new stuff. We bring it back to the center and share. We go to the edge. We bring it back to the center. It's a different energetic pattern than all the power being at the center. So no wonder the center is tired. It wasn't meant to hold the energy like that for as long as it has. So what if we make the center and the edge equally valid? What if we begin moving in different energetic patterns? What if we follow our own true living system pattern? I think that's what Lee was talking about. Holacracy and the fractal movement are actually the living system in action of which we are part. So what if we took up something different? I like to carry a little piece of New Zealand with me. This is the piece I'm carrying. It's a paua shell, the New Zealand abalone. It reminds me of home, one of the deep homes of my soul. And it also reminds me of the sea and the sky. So the other thing I carry to balance it is New Zealand greenstone, is jade, or what we would call paunamu, because that's like the earth, the strength and the resilience of the earth together with the beauty of the sea and the sky. But I also carry this one because it's a story in physical form. So when you see the paua shell, it's on the rock like this. It looks like a very ordinary kind of white type of thing. But it didn't always look like that. Paua used to be quite different because in the legend about Paua, the Maori legend, Paua used to be sparkling and beautiful. She was so beautiful that every other fish of the sea would go by her and grab something off of her because they wanted her beauty for themselves. And so eventually she called out to Tangaroa, who is the god of the ocean, and said, "Father, please help me." And he covered her with this plain white coat. In New Zealand, we honor this story when you go to the races and you see the people who collect the tickets and they're wearing this plain white coat, and often they're very officious, telling you exactly where to park and where to go. And some of us in our humanity are wearing this kind of white coat, just trying to blend in, when actually we look like this. We look like this. If we were sharing our stories, if we were embracing our stories, we might see the beauty of each other. So could we actually tell the beauty of our own stories and invite the beauty of the story of every other person we're working with in our humanity out? What would happen if we did? That's a question I'm traveling with. Could we invite each other and our stories to truly be present? What would happen to the world? So I want to leave you with a poem from David White. The loaves and fishes. This is not the age of information. This is not the age of information. Forget the news and the radio and the blurred screen. This is the time of loaves and fishes. People are hungry, and one good word is bread for 1,000. Please take your story and go well into the world and support each other to tell your stories too. It would be really such a beautiful thing. Thank you.